You're listening to the Co-Creator Network. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
Good afternoon, and welcome back to Limitless Living Radio, a program dedicated to helping people create and live the best life they can, regardless of their age, where they are in life, their personal circumstances, or what they have or they don't have. My name is Judith Albright, and my co-host is Barb Adams. Our topic today is happiness. How do we define it? Why it seems to be elusive for so many people? And most important of all, what can we do to make ourselves happier? Our guest today is the perfect person to address this, and I'm happy to introduce Dr. Jennifer Howard. Dr. Howard is a widely recognized thought leader on psychology and spirituality. She's an internationally known licensed psychotherapist, life and business coach, integrated energy healer, non-dual Kabbalistic healer, professional speaker, and radio talk show host. And she has written a book entitled Your Ultimate Life Plan that I'm sure she's going to be happy to tell us about. So hello, Dr. Howard, and thanks for taking the time to be with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Judith. And it's exciting to be here with both of you, you and Barb. And please call me Jennifer.
Okay. And you can call me Judy, because most people do.
Oh, good. Okay, cool.
Yeah, okay.
Love that. So happiness, huh?
Yes. I mean, there's probably as many definitions of that as there are people. So I can say what I think my definition of it is, and we can go from there. Not that what I think matters so much, but we'll just start with that. So for me, being happy means being peaceful. It's being able to handle the ups and downs that life throws at us without everything being a major crisis. And it's also living a life of purpose. I think we have to have a reason to get out of bed every day. And I think happiness is being able to contribute and feel like we're making a difference in the world. So what might you add to that?
Well, funny thing, the first chapter of my book is called Why Aren't We Happier? And it's the ultimate. There we go. So I agree with everything you just said. That and I think I know we were chatting a little bit before we all started this about it not being, and I think Barb brought it up actually, but it's exactly right, that it's not from the outside in, it's from the inside out. And that's what I think you said too, Judy.
Right, exactly.
And that, my first chapter talks about that it's, happiness is really an inside job, and that it's really not related to, it's somewhat related to our external circumstances. I mean, let's not be, crazy when you're, but to be able to tolerate life as it shows up, as our family dies, as we get sick, as life happens. I mean, I'm not saying it's all bad. I'm just telling you the bad things. I mean, people want, if they win lotto, they're like, yoo-hoo, we win lotto. But often the people who win lotto end up spending all the money because they don't know how to handle. I think it's coming that, you more, which I think you were talking about earlier, Judy, with the addictions and everything. We want to fill from the outside.
Like people think that if they just have the latest, greatest new thing, it's going to buy them happiness. And my former father-in-law, bless his heart, was one of the worst people I knew about that. He always felt that if he just bought the latest, greatest thing, then he would be happy. And what would happen is he would buy it, and then he would tell all the kids to go use it, and then he would gripe because they might do something to this. And then he couldn't understand why he had bought this great thing that was supposed to make all of us happy, and none of us was happy. And he kept doing that to the end of his life. If I just have the right thing, it'll make me happy.
It sounds like, Judy, he was living, from happiness. He was looking for happiness by using those things outside of himself to try to fill the inside. And many people do this.
Exactly. They're looking for the big answer. They don't want to look at themselves. They want to look out there somewhere. And I wrote this course. And in this course, I'm talking about various worldviews. And one of the things I identify people as having is they're just being surface dwellers, which means they never look underneath their feet. They live on the surface, they live shallowly, their only concern is what's on TV, the latest sports scores, and standing in line at Best Buy to get the new whatever it is, And they like my father-in-law, they thought this is going to make them happy somehow.
Well, and I think this is in degrees. I think we all do it to varying degrees. We think the next, what was Deepak Chuck Copra's book about spiritual materialism, that people, even in the spiritual realm, go from guru to guru, person to person, thing to thing, book to book, and of course, I want to sell my book, but
Right.
please go buy my book. But it's not going to be the answer. It can be an answer, and my book is full of questions and meditations and makes you go inside. I mean, my book doesn't let you be what you're calling a surface dweller, but we all do it to varying degrees.
Those are the people I call seekers. And there's nothing wrong with being a seeker, but hopefully you become a finder at some point, because I think the downside of being a seeker is that you just keep seeking. You keep jumping, like you said, from one thing to the other, looking for an answer, and it's always seems to be elusive.
Jennifer, I want to jump
Barb.
in here. Isn't happiness basically our nature, but it isn't really obtainable for us until we start living more consciously?
Right, exactly. That's what my book is all about. Yes, it's our nature. It's when we have that larger context, when we can sink to the deepest parts of ourselves, we feel happy. We feel content even when difficulty arises. We're able to tolerate difficulty. We don't see it as the enemy. We might see it as difficulty because we're not have a lobotomy or something, but we also know that we can tolerate whatever comes up and move with it, navigate it to get back to that state inside of ourselves, which is peaceful, which is happy, which is wholeness. That's our deeper nature. And not to be, one of those external dwellers. We want to be conscious about our lives, what we're thinking, what we're feeling in the moment. And I believe that's how we build the layers inside of ourselves so we can be with that nature and let that nature come out.
Well, I think so many of us get it knocked out of us as children because, our parents say, well, we're living in a negative world, and they're telling us, well, you don't deserve to be happy, or you can't be happy because just look all around you. And I think some of it is just childhood programming.
That's my second chapter or third chapter.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
I think it's the third chapter because being elements of a more conscious life is chapter 2, and chapter 3 is everything's an inside job, understanding your personal programming. So, I think we were raised by human beings, which means they have their own journey, and even if they're very well intentioned, and they may very well be. They were doing the best they could at any given moment and passing down to us what Bradshaw calls the poisonous pedagogy. But
yes.
But it's grist for the mill. I mean, it's really our journey to deal with what was with the programming lying before us and integrate it. And as we work with it and integrate it, we can become more deeply happy because we aren't just running on that automatic system like a computer. We're actually questioning and can remap how our lives feel to us by what we do. And we have genetic things. I mean, I inherited certain body problems that are in my gene pool that I have to dance with. That's my constant companion. And how do I do that? Consciously, compassionately. And I think our difficulties also give us, if we can take them on, give us great compassion for everybody who's on this journey, doing their best, struggling every day too sometimes,
Well, I think adversity does have its purpose because, I think people get forged in steel who had a lot of adversity. I think it builds compassion because if you've never been through anything, you're not really sympathetic to people who are going through it.
Well, if you've never been through anything, you're not awake because
no, you're not.
Because life is, it's not, somebody says, well, I've never had a bad day. Well, then nobody died. Your boyfriend didn't dump you. I'm talking about when we're young. I mean, stuff happens.
I actually
know someone that's like this. Her husband is this way. He is the most unawake person I think I've ever met. He's truly lost. He's always seeking, but he's never really had any experiences like this. He never had a girlfriend dump him. His parents are both still alive. His grandparents are still alive. They all went to church. They all did everything just so. Everything in his life has just been a plateau. And yet he is one of the most unhappy people I think you could ever meet because he doesn't understand the experiences of life that help us enrich what is within us so he doesn't go in there and even look. He's just like trying to float along the surface, as you're talking about, Judy, those surface dwellers. Very interesting.
Well, and that just shows you that happiness is an inside job, because here's a man who on the outside looks like he has everything. Yep. And on the inside, he feels empty and not in touch.
Yeah. One of my favorite quotations by Abraham Lincoln, of all things, and he said, most folks are about as happy as they make up their minds to be. And some people are just plain closed off and are not willing to admit that they have a good life. I worked with a woman like this. She was the secretary to the vice president of the company. And this woman had never had a bad day in her life, and yet she was one of the most sour people I've ever known. She came from money, she married into money, she had everything she wanted, she had friends, she had good health, and yet she couldn't do anything but complain. And she was completely unsympathetic or, empathetic to anybody who had a bad day or anything was going on. And she was just ruthless. She was just known for being ruthless, and we really didn't like her. And she couldn't understand any of this. And
she was in deep pain. I like working with people like that. I like clients who grew up. I didn't grow up wealthy, but I have through the years had a lot of clients who grew up with a lot of money, and it's just money. It's just money. And even though I need more of it right now myself, because
don't we all?
But it's not, and what a sorrow for her that she's so bitter about everything. What a sorrow.
I know, she was. She was very bitter. Right. Well, if money were the answer to everything, wouldn't there be a lot more happiness? Look at athletes and look at entertainers. And, if money brought happiness, wouldn't they all just be blissful? But look at what goes on. There's spousal abuse and custody battles and bitter divorces and who knows what. So if money was the answer, what's the question?
Exactly. Jennifer, how can people get more towards a conscious life? What are some of the ways people can move towards conscious living?
Well, the middle part of the book goes into the 4 dimensions of consciousness. And the way I do it is more of a mindset than just the normal way we think about physical, emotional, spiritual, mental. So I help people think about it by breaking it down. The simple way is to pay attention. That's a simple answer. Become aware. But what does that even mean? What do we mean when we say that? Well, being aware of your body, being aware of your thoughts, being aware of your feelings emotionally. I was talking to somebody who's a big deal spiritual teacher, and I can tell by the way he talked, and we were having a chat about it, his the feeling realm is like a hot potato for him. And I think there's a lot of, besides the surface skimmers that don't read the spiritual books, there are the spiritual books that skim the surface, that don't tell people that they really have to dive into all that they are, including their feelings, or it becomes this, as I talk about in the first chapter, something that nips at our heels. So becoming awake and aware is our sensations, our bodily, whatever that means, to be connected to our body, our feelings, our emotions. And I say in the book, and I can't tell you how many times I say this in the room with people, when somebody says, I feel that, ... that's not a feeling. If you're feeling that, you're talking about a thought.
Right.
So people don't know the difference often between a thought and a feeling, and then really understanding our thoughts and our belief systems, diving into them deeply, and then being able to embody. Spirit is kind of what I call the emanation realm, which is emanating all the way back down to the physical. But we can talk more about the mindsets in a minute. But yeah, thanks, Barb. That's, becoming conscious. It's easier if we break it down a little bit. Otherwise, what are we talking about? And I have a lot of exercises and meditations and ways to think about this in the book to help people, because when I teach, what I like to do is talk about something and then take people into an embodied spirit experience of it. Because if we're not experiencing wholeness, if we're not experiencing God or all that is, or whatever we're talking, whatever you like to call it, then it's just still a thought in our mind. And And that thought can be shifted. So then we're not really going to be able to be happy as long as we're just in our thoughts or just in our feelings. So to be able to see them and work with them allows them not to run the show all the time.
And don't you find that men, excuse me, that men have more difficulty doing this than women? In my clientele, I find that men are oftentimes very out of touch with their feelings, and they can't even identify what it is they're feeling.
That's I know what you're talking about. Men don't have the right brain, left brain, the corpus callosum, I think it's called. It doesn't work as fast. I think men have to develop that more. But the truth is, I know that book that everybody likes, and men are from wherever and women are from somewhere else. But the truth is, we're more alike than we are different. I love men, and I have them. At any given moment, it's weird because most therapy practices aren't this way, but I usually have half men at any given moment in my practice. And I think men have difficulties in certain ways. Sometimes it's interesting. Sometimes it's the man who comes in and is trying to drag their wife into therapy. So yes, I think men have some more difficulty, but I think, the human journey is much more alike than it is different.
Oh, I would agree with that. And I think a lot of it is cultural conditioning, like, where mothers and, parents, older generations taught their young boys that it wasn't okay to cry, that it wasn't manly to show your emotions. And so they didn't learn to do that. Right. And so as adults, it's very hard for them to come back and get in touch with it, because I think they on some level believe that it shows weakness on their part, or they're doing something wrong.
Well, and some women, women often cry when they're angry, and men are angry when they want to cry. So I think it's just a distortion, whichever direction you're coming in. Women, it's hard for women sometimes just to stand up and say, absolutely not.
I would agree with that.
Definitely, it is difficult. So how important then for both of you is it to emote constructively in working towards different levels of happiness?
Well, I
Judy
think it's critical.
Or Jennifer, either one.
Well, I'll answer that one, because I work with something called the emotion code, and that's dealing with trapped emotions in the body. So if you don't deal with your feelings when you're going through them, then you end up stuffing them, and we all know that can be not a good thing, because it ends up with, if you leave stuff stuffed long enough, you don't deal with it, then it comes out as some other thing. It's like it's in there. It's like when you get a splinter in your finger, your body tries to throw it off. Well, I think we talked about that before, Barb, where the body tries to get rid of its stresses like that. And if it can't, then, the pressure cooker blows up, literally. So I think it's extremely important.
Well, absolutely. And there's people who do both ends of the spectrum. There's the people who stuff or repress and shut down their feelings, and then they get stuffed. We all had to repress to a certain degree, because we're in school and something happens and we don't have the faculty, or daddy comes home mad at mom, whatever the story is. We're just trying to cope, and we don't have the skill set or the psyche to know how to do it. That's part of developmental growth. But people come to me and they've either stuffed, or they are hysterical all the time and they're overdoing their feelings. And for those people, you want to help find their own container, their own ability to contain their feelings. That's not stuffing. It's just not vomiting, their feelings. I had a client years ago, God love her, I loved her to death, but she felt, now that she'd newly found her feelings, that she should be able to flail them on everyone. And she wasn't going to repress them. No, I'm not repressing. No, but nobody wants to be around you because you're screaming at everybody all the time. Or, so there's that balance. Just thinking about Kabbalah right now, there's that balance, or actually integration, of both sides of containing when appropriate and expressing appropriately. And I talk a lot about that in the book, about having that container available, so those boundaries, those limits, so I can express to my husband exactly what I need to express to him. And I think relationships are a great way to bring up our deepest junk. But I need to say, absolutely not. I'm tired of this, and this is why. But if I go, he's not listening. He's not listening.
Yeah. So it basically takes quite a bit of practice, though, Jennifer, what I'm hearing you say, to get to that place, though, where you can both contain them and express them appropriately, where you're in that state of balance.
Well, what I like to say to people is, time's going to go by anyway. You might as well be conscious, because, in 5 years, don't you want things to be different than they are now? And I know that all is one, and in any given moment we can take a breath and be in wholeness. I know that from the holographic perspective, but from a linear perspective and a personal growth and development perspective, we want to look back and go, wow, 5 years ago I did this and this and this, and now I'm not doing that anymore, doggone it. And if we don't start being conscious, 5 years will go by and we're going to do the same stuff to the same degree that we did before.
It's those old habitual and repeated patterns that we do, though, isn't it?
Right.
Because we just kind of get stuck in those. We just keep repeating and repeating and repeating, whether it be the emotions or the thoughts or whatever in our life.
Well, I talk about that in chapter 1, that if you're repeating, and there's 2 ways to think about this. One is that if you're repeating and it's not getting better, sometimes we repeat to refine once more. But if you're repeating and there's nothing different, then there's some hidden payoff. There's some way that you're getting something out of staying stuck. You're getting rescued by somebody, you're rescuing yourself. You then have an excuse that you don't have to really look at it. I have a list of strategies that we can use sometimes. We want the quick fix. I mean, I see people, it makes me so sad. I see people, so upset, and their lives are so hard, and they go from quick fix to quick fix to quick fix, and that they just stay put and actually out with themselves, that it would change, it would shift. But if you're just jumping from thing to thing, 5 years will go by and nothing will be different.
Well, and they want somebody else to fix them.
Often they do. Or often they're misguided and don't know what to look for, and don't even know they're doing the quick fix. I mean, I see that, listen, the quick fix books are the ones that are big sellers. People like that. The 7 Easy Steps to Enlightenment. I'm done.
Right.
That sounds great.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
I know people want formulas, and they like, I don't want to have to think about this. So just tell me what to do, and I'll do it, and all will be good.
Right.
And then they're always surprised when it doesn't seem to work, and they're not happy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's all very interesting, isn't it? And especially for both of you, you get to work with the people directly with these types of, where they're seeking to do the inside job, but here they're coming to someone else again, and that's not a bad thing, but they need to understand it's still up to them. You're facilitating them. And so many people, and I'm assuming both of you have seen this even with your clients and patients, that they come to you wishing you to fix them, hoping you're going to be the one that fixes them. Okay, the books didn't do it. The workshops didn't do it. Okay, are you going to do it for me? How do you get through to them that it's an inside job?
Well, I just have to plain flat tell them, do you want to change? You don't you? And they either do or they don't. Of course, I use other techniques to find out if they really do on the subconscious level. But, a lot of people really don't want to be fixed, quote unquote. And it's just what Jennifer said, is that it's serving them. And with EFT, we call those things tail enders. We've talked about this before. It's the big yes, but. Yes, I want to be different, but I have a vested interest in being the way I am because this is serving me. We talked about, go ahead.
Well, I know those, I do, use those other techniques too, often, but I think what I'm really good at, because I've been doing this for so bloody long, is I'm really good at not letting people get away from themselves. And I do it in a very kind way. I'm very conscious of not shaming and being kind, but I find where they're trying to escape. And I tried to write this book so it would do the same thing. And many people said it does, but it's not the same as being with somebody exactly. But, when I see them going out that door, I go, do you notice you're going out that door right there? Oh, I am. Yeah. Do you want to go out that door right now? Do you really want to do that? No, I don't. All right, then come back and let's work with it. So really fight, because we all do it. We all do it to varying degrees. We all try to find that escape hatch wherever it could be, because it's hard sometimes to be with what is. It's like, oh, again, or whatever. So I think, do you really want to change? Yes, I do. All right, then we have to open this box right here and look in.
Right. I have a question for you, Jennifer, going back to the lady who absolutely was, found herself and started screaming at everybody. I have a friend who's going through a difficult time right now with a teenage daughter. And this daughter is completely out of control. She, I think she's typical of a lot of kids today who grew up without boundaries. And I don't think that parents intended that to happen, but that's what happened. This girl really wasn't reined in when she was younger. And so now she's learned the temper tantrums get what she wants. But she's getting out of control, and she breaks things. I mean, she throws food, she breaks things in the house, and worst of all, she attacks her parents. And so, what can you do with something like that? How can you turn a kid around like that?
Well, you got to turn the parents around. You've got to talk. The parents need to be in therapy and learn how to work with their daughter.
Yeah.
And then the daughter, I've worked with kids that way. I mean, I'm not I don't specialize in children, but you're going to have them see they have to have consequences. You break that,
exactly.
You're gonna have a consequence, and the consequence, eventually the consequence will be prison if you don't learn how to behave yourself. So here's this is why I the parenting today, and I'm all about kindness, but I'm also about boundaries. And no is an okay word. Parents don't want to have to say no to their kids, but the world's going to say no. That's why sometimes the new age spirituality of we're going to get everything we want, we're not going to get everything we want.
No,
nobody gets everything we want. So to learn at an early age, okay, I didn't get that, but let me make this work. Or I didn't get it now. I mean, to get my book published, I had to do cartwheels for 5 years, and then I wrote it. It's up for some awards. It's a finalist in 3 categories for 1 award so far, and I'm very proud of it. It's really well written, and I worked my ass off on it. But it took work. I had to dedicate myself. I had to say, do I want to go to lunch with a friend, or do I want to get the book done? No, I want to get the book done. Okay, so for a year I didn't see people practically. So what my point is to teach these children that if they don't concentrate, or they don't focus themselves, or that the world says, no, all right, I can't go that way, I'll go this way. If the world hadn't said no to me about being an actor, I'd be an actor now. I'd be a soap opera star or something instead of writing this book, and I feel like helping more people. So I would say to the parents, please get yourself into therapy to learn how to say no to this kid quickly, and to get the kid with the same family counselor that sits the kid down and says, you can't behave this way. This is going to have to stop.
She doesn't see any reason to stop this, and it's escalating, and now they're almost afraid of her because she's physically very strong. And she attacks them. And so I guess at some point there's going to have to be some kind of intervention because she just
I hope so. Because it sounds, from what I'm hearing you say, it sounds like this could escalate where there will be intervention, all right, but it'll unfortunately be from law enforcement.
Well,
and it'll probably be too late at that point.
Right. And that's the thing, is that when they're 16 years old, it's a little tough to turn them around. We see this around us all the time. You go to a restaurant and you see people completely ignoring their kids. And one day, I don't know, Barb, if you were with me the day that we were down to the local deli and they have an open food bar thing.
Yes.
Were we there when we were sitting there, and there was a group of women sitting at a nearby table, and their kids were running amok in there. And the kids were coming up and sticking their fingers in the food, in the pudding and stuff that was up there. And the women were doing nothing. They would do nothing.
And it's getting to be somewhat typical no matter where you go, in the stores or even out anywhere. Even when I'm out, doing my trails out there, walking the trails or whatever, kids are just all over the place, running and screaming and jumping. And, I've actually had mothers come at me, however, when I've said something. When the child is being inappropriate, I'll turn around and I'll just gently say something. And the mother's gone off on me. And it's like, I think, Jennifer, you're totally correct. It's the parents that need to relearn and know what boundaries are. Because you can't teach what you don't know.
Well, you said relearn. I don't think they ever knew them. I mean, either their parents were, and people will, that's about consciousness again. People will swing the other way. If their parents were so very strict, they'll let go too loose sometimes on the, with their kids, rather than learning what's an appropriate boundary, what's an important thing to say no to, and when is it okay to say, all right, you can stay out later than we'd talked about because you asked me, and this is a special party, but I do expect you home by this time.
But we learn by example, and when we don't have those examples out there, it's difficult sometimes. And if society itself is breaking down, and if supposedly it takes a village to raise a child anymore, well, they're not getting those examples either from the village or at home. So everything starts at home. It all starts at home. We need to think about how we ourselves want to be that change we want to see in the world, and put that out as an example, and hopefully it'll ripple out from there. I actually had a friend, unfortunately, she had her first child when she was 30. We both did, and he would have been in junior high at this point. And he was allowed, he went to Montessori school, not that that's bad, but she decided never to put boundaries on him. She was so overjoyed to have a child. She just let him do whatever. Well, by the time he got to what would have been junior high age last year, he became a juvenile delinquent. He got in trouble with the law. He just didn't understand boundaries or anything. He was a bully. He was everything. It was horrible. And to the point where when he did get in trouble with the law, his only option, he felt, was suicide, which unfortunately he did. He killed himself. They paid the ultimate price.
That's so sad.
Well, and I too, I had a friend who put no boundaries on her son either, and it had a different outcome. But in a way, this young man is living a dead life. So, but he was a young child who she never put the brakes on either. And unfortunately, he and my oldest daughter were holy terrors, and the two of them together, I'm surprised the world is still standing, because they were a lethal combination, needless to say. But he never had any boundaries put on him. And as he grew older, he kept thinking that the world should be the way he wanted it. And he kept trying, maneuver and manipulate. And the world was supposed to be this way. And when it wasn't, he went absolutely ballistic, spent time in mental institutions, quite a long time, developed some really strange behavior. And today, he's a college professor, but he's a complete introvert. He has no social life. He has no social skills. And he's just walking through, his whole thing is intellect and nothing to do with emotions. So there's that. And then I had another example of this exact same thing with a different outcome even yet. And that was that my former neighbors had an older boy and two twins. And as they grew up, the mother was, believed in peace. And she would not put any boundaries on these boys because she said she didn't want them to have any bad memories. And so they became completely uncontrollable. The mother and father finally split up. The kids stayed with the dad. And the dad would come over to get the neighbors to come over and say, you got to do something with my kids because I can't control them. And they would be smashing holes in the house. Well, the final outcome was this, that the oldest boy, and I'm not sure what happened, became registered as a sex offender. And one of the twins ended up as a juvenile delinquent and in jail. And the other one was sent to military school because he couldn't be handled either. And that was all because they didn't want them to have bad feelings or bad memories.
That is so sad to me. That's so sad. What I was going to say is there's, as a therapist, being a therapist for 25 years, there's organic. Sometimes you medicate what's not organic anyway, just to try to move it through. But, there's the organic pieces that people can inherit, or the manic depression, and which can be somewhat environmental. But there's also, the personality level, which is what most therapists are not trained to address at this point. They don't teach that anymore in school. They teach cognitive behavioral. So they're not teaching them how to get to this personality level. And it takes a lot of work. It's a slow change process, but it can happen. But somehow they have to feel like they want the help. They either have to feel like their life isn't working, what's going on, or I guess they're mandated, and that's never going to work that well. But to have that kind of wounding where the parent gives them the illusion that the world is going to do everything they want is a horrible thing to do to a child, because they have no coping skills for when life does what it does.
Right. Well, don't kids feel more secure when they do have boundaries, because they know that the parents are supposed to be in control, and when the parents aren't in control, I think it confuses the heck out of the kids.
It's scary. I've had children in my adults in my practice with parents who were alcoholic or not there or tried to say yes all the time, and it's scary for them because they don't know that's why they're punching walls, trying to feel the boundaries. They're trying to feel where they are in the world.
Well, and don't you think it's because of this out of control that it generates so much anxiety, that's part of what the drug culture is about? They're trying to self-medicate themselves. They're either doing it with alcohol or they're doing it with drugs, or they get this idea that we can't have a good time unless we're high on something. We live in a college town, of course, and of course, Party Central here.
Where do you live? Where do you live?
I live in Fort Collins, Colorado, which is home of Colorado State University.
Sure.
Right. And we're not as bad a party school as Boulder is down the road in Boulder. But
yes. We're challenging them, however. We're trying.
I think we're catching up to them with partying. Mm-hmm. But, I observe this around here that people don't seem to think they can have a good time unless they are absolutely drunk on their butts, face down in the gutter. And that's considered a good time. It's like, how is this a good time? I don't know about you, but I don't like throwing up my guts and being face down in the gutter. So I can't figure out.
Well, maybe it's testing their limits. Maybe that's what we're talking about here.
I don't know what it is.
I have, in my chapter 4, I talk about journey from the wounded ego to the sacred self. And if we, can't, you would want to say to them, tell me what's really fun about being out of control.
Because that's something I never could figure out. Yeah.
Yeah,
Jennifer, you mentioned the ego word. Most people, especially in the spirituality realm, how most people react to the word ego. It's like, we got to get rid of it. Oh, the ego's a bad thing. It's not, is it?
No. It's a part of us. It's our individuation. It's the individual part of us. It's just part of our psyche. And as we look at the childhood programming, as we look at the environmental influences that happened to us growing up, as we look at whatever genetic input we had, however we incarnated this life with the lessons, as we continue to pay attention to that and heal things that need to be healed, that ego, that part of ourselves relaxes, integrates, becomes less how they talk about it like it's the bad thing we want to shove away. But anytime we want to shove something away, we're actually giving it energy. We want to invite this whole chapter. It's a big chapter on the ego, and I help people understand what it is from different vantage points and from different psychological vantage points to different spiritual vantage points. But I wanted to write a whole book called "Should I Take My Ego to Lunch or Kill It?"
There are times when I wish we could just unscrew our head and leave it on the bedside table and go off without it. Wouldn't that be nice?
Well, but we want to take it to lunch. It's like those kids. It's like those parts of ourselves. That's why we all have to be careful when we say those people do this, and I do it all the time. But, those people are us too, so that we don't leave out those parts of ourselves, because it's all one thing. So, that ego is a part of us that needs to be taken to lunch, that needs to have nice little cup of tea beside us, so it calms down, so we calm down, so the anxiety's not so high, and we can come forth when that relaxes, our sacred self, our true self, whatever you want to call it. I think it's more able to kind of come through. Now, we've gone from one extreme to the other. These kids we've been talking about aren't ready for this book necessarily. They need some rudimentary. Therapy, and I would give them different books to read, because this is a book more for people who've really done some work on themselves. They've done some workshops, they've read some of these self-help books, especially these really popular self-help books, and I'm not going to say them on air, but that everybody goes crazy over and have been on the bestseller list for years. People go, wow, and then they go, how do you do it? And my book is the how do you do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the problem.
Yours is a workshop in a book.
That's right. Mm-hmm. It's a workshop in a book. So it really helps people, grab hold of these things that feel elusive, and or those repeating patterns that feel like they can't get the handle on them. This book gives you that way to kind of, almost like therapy or coaching, gives you that way to kind of look at it and grab a hold of it.
Sorry about that. Time out. Whoops.
But the ego is not a dirty word. And I think, like I said, as long as we keep anything outside of ourselves, if I say, don't think of a pink elephant, where did you go? You went to a pink elephant. So don't have your feelings. Don't have your sadness. They're the enemy. Well, if the sadness is the enemy, then you're going to spend your life running from it, which means you're going to have to drink or get drunk on your ass or do whatever, because you can't tolerate life, because life has sadness in it.
Well, and what you resist persists. And so the more you wallow in it, the more you get.
Well, in the same vein, though, too, I think a lot of people get stuck because they start beating themselves up over these things. And we have to realize it's okay. You're going to feel these times. You almost have to learn how to embrace the suffering at times in your life, that it's okay to feel bad sometimes. And I think a lot of people, especially in the spiritual movement, think, well, once I get to this level, I shouldn't be feeling these ways. And then they start looking and going, I'm still having some things happen that aren't feeling so wonderful. I'm not feeling happy. What's wrong? And they fall into that beating myself up situation or anxiety.
I really see this. I was doing some investigating about it. That's that spiritual teacher that I was looking at, and there was this couple statements in there about don't. Basically, when you reach like you said, when you reach a certain level, you won't have your sadness. And I think that's misleading. I mean, maybe you do. I don't know anybody.
I agree.
I think it's
you can
misleading.
Have your sadness. You'll just embrace it differently. You'll have a different perspective on it, but you'll still have these instances in your life.
Well, you can't turn off your emotions.
Well, you don't want to. You
don't
want
to.
The richness of when my dad died, the richness of the grief. I think if you embrace things fully, the more integrated you become, the more it's easy to really just dive in, and then you move through it.
Yeah. Well, and so many people are in denial. They don't want to go through it because it's too painful. They can't face it.
Right. Or fall apart. They don't have the, that I tell people, if a feeling feels overwhelming, that's because somebody's ego strength isn't that they can handle it yet. So you don't have to dive in yet. You put your big toe in, and then after you put your big toe in, you sit with that a little bit, then you put your foot in, and so on. You move forward into being able to embrace that feeling fully. And eventually the ego gets strong enough that you can just dive in and say, I'm taking it on, and ride that bucko onto the other side, because it'll move if you can take it on.
And I think most people want lasting change. They want it through a quick fix, or they want to know whatever I'm doing, it's going to last, right? So how do you get to that point of lasting change?
Well, I think by what we're talking about here, by really taking on and continuing to, I talk about it as the 6 issues in the first part of the book, as kind of a joke that we all have a certain amount of issues that we kind of came in to work on. And I think and they're all basic, intimacy and, self-worth, and we all have varying degrees of those. But to really have that change last means we have to be able to tolerate what comes at us, right? So to be able to tolerate those difficult feelings coming at us takes us to that larger context that we started the show with about happiness. And then that change lasts because we know when the sadness comes, or the grief comes, or the illness comes, that we are strong enough to ride the bucko and a bronco or whatever it is, and sit in all that's there and the preciousness and the sweetness of life when we're able to be with all of it. That's how we create those lasting change. We're willing to continue to take it on. When sadness shows up again, we say, come on in, like we did to our ego, let's have a cup of tea. And we're with it. And when we're with it and we dive in as best we can, as much as we need to, sometimes you don't need to dive in. Sometimes all you need to do is go, oh, that's my sadness. And then it shifts. That's all. Sometimes you got to dive in. But that's what creates that lasting change, is that willingness to take it on again. Into a deeper level, into more integration. I mean, I just think it continues on. You talk to the people who we, look up to maybe, or see their books and whatever, and if they're, really telling us the truth, there's levels and levels and levels and levels and levels and levels. As long as we're human, we're taking on the next level of whatever shows its face.
Yeah, and all of those things too, what I'm hearing you saying, Jennifer, the undertone of all this is that attitude of gratitude, no matter what it is, whether it be that sadness that you're having or the great whatever's going on in your life, everything is met with the attitude of gratitude. And at that point, that's where the happiness can come from, when you're seeing life with a different perspective.
I think we ultimately just sink into gratitude. I think everything becomes gratitude. But if we're having a bad day and having trouble being grateful, it's also okay to make a gratitude list, But eventually, I don't think you need to make the list. You're just sitting in that state of being of gratitude because you're grateful you're able to have the journey. What a
Yeah.
lovely thing. Last week I had a breast biopsy, which turned out negative.
Oh,
And
thank goodness.
My goodness,
yes,
yeah.
exactly. But, here we are, right? With life. Here it is.
Mm-hmm.
1 in 8 get breast cancer. So am I one of the 1 in 8? Not so far. And I don't think I will. I don't have it in my background or anything. But, we're all going to die of something, hopefully later than sooner. But here it is, riding the Bronco, really saying I'm willing to meet every moment, ever how difficult, fully awake and aware. That's the way to real happiness. That's the way toward the fullness of life, the richness of life, the relaxation of taking it on. There was some writer, and I can't remember who it was, who was talking about somebody who, I think the guy who wrote the book on laughter. I can't think of his name right now. Anyway, doesn't matter. But he was talking about walking himself through a heart attack and talking to his own inner child. He lived, obviously, to tell us the story. But, I think I'm having a heart attack. What do I need to do? Well, I need to call 911. Okay. And talking himself through it and talking to his own those inner vulnerable parts of us that say, oh my God, we're going to be okay. We'll figure it out. If you're not okay, you'll die. And when you die, you'll walk yourself through that. It's deep stuff we're talking about.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes people are not willing to embrace that happier part of themselves. And I don't know what your experience has been, but I've often found, particularly with grief, that people oftentimes are very unwilling to get rid of their grief because they feel it's the last connection with their departed loved one. And they're thinking, how can I be happy when my significant other or my child or whatever is gone? Mm-hmm. And so they feel that it's actually disloyal to give up their grief. Because, you're still walking around living and laughing, and how can that be when the other person is gone? And so then I think you can go into catastrophic grief just because you don't want to get rid of it. And I've seen this happen. I'm sure you've seen similar experiences, haven't you, Jennifer?
Yes,
where people don't want to get rid of it. They think that it's just disloyal, and they feel guilty. They feel guilty if they give up this grief.
Well, that's that beginning, what I talk about in the first chapter about reaching for hidden payoffs.
Mm-hmm.
That if you're stuck, you're really stuck in something. There's something you're not seeing, or there's a hidden payoff here. And the hidden payoff is, if I stay in my grief, I get to be connected.
Exactly.
Well, is there a way to connect without being grief? Can you connect through your joy about them? Can you connect through your life?
They need to remember not the grief of the passing, but all the joy that they had when that person was living. And it's shifting the perspective, changing your thinking about it. Because the more you dwell on that grief, the more you're going to hang on to it, because I think people are fearful that if they let go of that grief, they're letting go of the person and, they're just going to be gone.
Well, what you said, when you were saying, Judy, I've thought about the sweetness, like having them connect to the sweetness that they felt toward that person. Right. That's not the grief. It's the sweetness, the kindness, the gentleness, the excitement, the fun,
Mm-hmm.
And we miss them, I miss my dad. It's
right.
I miss him, and it's life.
But you're not willing to wallow in your grief about that, because you are remembering all the wonderful things about your dad. And so many people just can't.
And I dove into it. And when it showed up, Judy, I dove right in.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think you have to. I think you have to acknowledge it and process it and say, it's okay for me to feel this way, but it's going to pass, and I'm going to remember all the good things and not how awful I felt when it passed.
And, we all process differently and at different times.
Right.
So sometimes we might look and say, why is somebody still grieving? Well, maybe they're stuck, or maybe they're just processing it more slowly. And we have to help them be with it more and more deeply. And then they come out on the other side.
And then society says, well, gosh, it's been 3 weeks. Why aren't you over it? I'm sure we've all experienced that too. Right. It's like, why are you still grieving?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, I actually had that happen. I was 12 when my mother passed, and about
Oh,
6 weeks down the road, I remember going to some social function, and I was just standing around, and somebody came up to me and said something about my mother, and I just lost it.
of course.
And they were like, "Well, what's her problem?
Yeah,
Why is she
Oh,
yeah,
all
I know.
upset in front of all of us?" This person actually had the gall to say it upset her that I got upset. And I still
oh.
remember that, and that was a long time ago.
That was traumatic for you. That was traumatic for you because a 12-year-old to lose their mommy, that's a big deal. That's right at
Yeah,
Yeah.
puberty. That's
Mm-hmm.
yep,
right when you needed mommy to show you how to be a woman in the world. That's a big deal when
yeah,
we lose our parents young. I mean, I was lucky. I'm in my 50s and I lost my dad. So, it's a different thing, but 12 years old, wow,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
hard.
It was hard, but I walked through it. I went through all the stages of it, and it taught me because loss was something I needed to learn how to do in this lifetime. And I just accept all of these things, and I think that's it. And depending on how you greet these, and you're both talking about this, acknowledging it, how you greet these and take it within can define, especially when you're younger on, by either the examples that have been set for you or how you react, will help set somewhat your life stages, how you're going to go through life. And it's a matter of learning how to either embrace this, or if you don't, learning how to break those habits later on to get
Mhm.
to that ultimate happiness, that ultimate life plan that we want to have, and live that life we've always dreamed of, which is all in Dr. Howard's book.
Thank you. Yay.
Got your plug
Thank
in there for you.
you. Thank you,
Right,
sweetie.
exactly. Right.
My book has. I'm so. I hope that Judy. I know you didn't have a chance to look at it, so after the fact, I hope you'll. I think you'll like it, and
Oh,
and
I
I
will.
think
I
it's.
will.
I think it's a book that people, especially if they're coaches or therapists, can really invite their clients to read through and use it kind of as grist for the mill. Especially when you have a client who comes in and goes, "I'm great, everything's great," and you're
Oh,
like,
sure.
"Oh, really? Okay, good.
Oh,
Let's
really?
be
Well,
with
why are
how
you in here if you're okay?
Why are you
that's
here? Yeah.
well, and if the truth is, forever and ever, amen. There's always something to work on. So we can be great and still have this little thing that we know we want to refine. So not that people should stay in therapy for 50 years, but I'm just saying that if you say everything in my life is perfect, well, you're just not awake. Of course, there's things you want to
No.
work on. Relationships can be deeper, sexuality can be deeper, money can be better. Whatever.
Hmm.
But this is a good companion because it gives people so many ways to think about it. And the four dimensions, really, chapter 7 was so funny because I've gotten some great feedback that that's people's favorite chapter, and I can't tell you how hard that chapter was to write. It's the mindset of the narrow uh, action physical mindset of the narrow dimension, that black and white thinking, kind of what we're talking about, Judy, with a lot of the people that we end up seeing, or at
Right.
least parts of them have
Mhm.
that narrow black and white thinking. It's the fundamentalism end of the spectrum of religion. It's right and wrong. There's only right and there's only wrong. There's no gray. um, and
And
that
don't you,
kind of and the way couples fight. I have a whole section on the way a couple will fight if that's where they're. And we all have those pieces of ourselves. We all have slivers. I talk about slivers of consciousness.
right.
We all have these slivers that are in all dimensions. So it's not like we grow out of one completely, but we have less and less of ourselves in those lower mindsets, smaller mindsets, and then they're nested. So then the next biggest mindset is the formation emotional, and that's when we can step into life having meaning and an emotional life where we can identify with people because I'm sad, you're sad. You don't have to be a Presbyterian for me to identify with you. You're just a person who's sad. So we have a larger way to
Hmm.
identify. It's not so tribal. Then we move into the creation mental, and that's where we actually can, at the very top end of this, talking linearly, where we can really see where we pull our thoughts from consciousness. So we can see how we create our lives from that. But in the middle of it, it's really looking at belief systems. And then the largest context being the emanation spiritual, which is really the language of God, which is silence.
Hmm.
And that spiritual dimension that goes through everything.
Well, don't you feel that some of this rigidity, if not all of it, is based on fear? a fear of being out of control, that if if you're really rigid and, you've got it all figured out, then that's comforting. And when somebody challenges that, then you're going out of control. And I think that just solidifies that rigidity more, because they're so afraid that somebody's going to challenge what they believe, and they might have to face that or do something different, get out of their comfort zone.
Right. And all of us, going to that next level out of our comfort zone, out of that next level of belief system that says, this is who I am now.
Mm-hmm. We're worth it, though. We are so worth it. It's worth doing this. Go out of the comfort zone. That's it. Go inside, dig deeper, because each and every one of us are worth it. And happiness is our nature.
Yes.
But we know that, but I don't think a lot of people do.
And our job is, people who are helper bees. That's what I think the three of us are, helper bee people. Mm-hmm. Our job is to help people know that they are worth it, that it's worth the time, that it's worth the moment. And, it's standing in line at the bank, being conscious of your thoughts and feelings. When you're driving somewhere, you don't have to. A meditation practice, I think, is helpful and important, and doing work with somebody like Judy or me is important. And but I think that it's also, you can thread it throughout your day.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Exactly.
Well, we're coming down to the end of our hour, so I guess we better wrap it up and say whatever final words we want to say. I guess I would just like to throw in about how people don't feel good enough. I mean, I'm sure that you find these people too, that most people I work with on some level don't believe that they're good enough. And in fact, because of that, I even wrote a little course, and it's called "When Will I Be Good Enough?" And it's based. I make them write down all the reasons why they aren't good enough, and what it's going to take for them to be good enough, and then we work on those belief systems. But so anyway, but that seems to be underlying a lot of unhappiness in this world too, is that we're taught from birth that we're not good enough. And so we keep thinking that. I mean, I think society as a whole teaches us we're not good enough. Yeah.
Okay. That's absolutely right. I was thinking about that today, actually, about how to be good enough. Nothing's going to be perfect. So how do we accept ourselves today as best we can, forgive ourselves for the belly fat or whatever the story is of today,
right?
And know that tomorrow we can work on that belly fat, or we can educate ourselves more fully, or we can be more present, or we have an opportunity to continue to grow, and can take that on today.
And I think it's important for people to think they have a choice about that. And that's something else I encounter. I'm sure you do too, is people think that, well, that's just the way it is, and I don't have any choice.
Right.
The fact of the matter is, we do have choices. It's a matter of making a decision to make a choice.
Right.
So anyway, where can we find out more about your book? You want to give us your website?
Oh, yes. Thank you. This was a really fun discussion. Thank you so much, both of you, for having me, Judy and Barb. Very, very fun, and very fun to know that my producer, Ken, is on the other side.
That's right. Exactly. He's on with us too.
Yay! I love it. Okay. It's yourultimatelifeplan.com is the book website. You can read 2 chapters there for free. You can buy the book there. You can read what other people have said about the book. You can listen to other radio shows, including Barb's other radio show that I did. It'll be up today on the website. drjenniferhoward.com is the main site with the blog. Go there, say hello to me. Sign up so you can keep in mind where I'm going to be, where I'll be teaching, book signings, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm going to do some television on the West Coast. They've called me, so I'll be taping that in a month or so. I did a reality show called Curvy Girls, but where I was a therapist, so you can come see me work. But come sign up, tell me you're there, and I'll keep you up with everything. And blessings to both of you, and blessings to your audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jennifer.